Hi, this is Amanda Dolan, and welcome to the Mental Society. Today, we are joined by Julie Hall. Julie is a licensed marriage and family therapist working with students, parents, couples, and families around many issues, including anxiety, depression, disordered eating, and trauma. And she has a heart for outreach to those in trauma recovery and life transition stages. Julie is trained in the practice of mindfulness, as well as restoration therapy, emotionally focused therapy, cognitive behavioral therapy, and dialectic behavioral therapy, all of which are tools she uses in her work. In part to her own experience, Julie deeply desires to walk alongside women and couples experiencing fertility challenges. And she has provided clinical support and facilitation for Seattle's Pacific Northwest Mind-Body Fertility Program. Thank you so much for joining me today to discuss how fertility struggles can impact our mental health and well-being, relationships, and all of that. And just for our listeners, Julie and I, we're on the same page. Just want to give you a definition of what infertility is, which is the inability to get pregnant after trying to conceive for 1 year or longer. So let's get into it. Julie, we talked about that or I said your own experience, what interested you in fertility treatments and how it's affecting women and couples. So would you share a little bit about your own story?
Yeah, I'm happy to. So prior to stepping into this field of marriage and family therapy in this study, I was in tech. So I worked in tech in all different facets of tech for a long time. And then my husband and I, we actually started to try to expand our family, and we ended up having a lot of issues. Physically, we were not able to get pregnant. And this was really, for me, a shock because this wasn't something that was in my family. Nobody in my family, as far as I knew, was had experienced fertility issues. And so it was a really difficult time. It was a difficult time for me. It was a difficult time in our relationship. And I'll share with you just a quick story, Amanda. So I was at, we were at an appointment with our reproductive endocrinologist, and just kind of a routine appointment where, we were going through treatments. And he was talking with us about, what the next steps were. And then he kind of slid me a business card of a therapist who worked in the practice with him. And he had shared with me that it might be helpful for me to meet with this person. And I was initially offended. Because I thought, what, I'm navigating all these sort of biological issues. The way that I was receiving this, passing of a business card was, now you're telling me something's wrong with me.
Right, like it's your emotions that are getting in the way of pregnancy, or
right. My emotions are getting in the way right now. The way that I language it was, something's wrong with me. So I took it. And as much as I was resistant, I did end up going to that appointment. And as far as my resistance, part of the resistance too was that, going to therapy as I was growing up, that was not something at all that was affirmed. Right. There was so much stigma around going to therapy. Right. It was for people who really had issues, and it was something you kept really close to the vest. And, and so it was like the stigma around it was shame, right? The stigma around it was shame. And so all that being said, like I shared with you, I did go to the appointment. And when I went to the appointment, it was amazing. It was amazing. The way that I describe it is, it was like the floodgates opened. I had no idea that I was carrying so much emotional pain in the midst of what I was navigating. I just didn't know. And so to have this space in which I was being listened to, and it was really made for me to just process kind of the emotional experience that I was carrying alongside kind of the physicality of what we navigate with infertility, it was obviously life changing for me. And it was really the catalyst for me in going back to school and becoming that resource for people who were navigating similar issues to myself, because I knew at the time that I was walking through this, it was incredibly isolating. And I didn't feel like there were resources for people like me. And it just exacerbated the stigma that I am alone in the
Mhm.
middle of something so painful.
And, you know, you're saying like that you felt so alone. And what's interesting about that is about 1/5 of women experience
Mhm.
infertility
I
or
know.
without a, and that's a lot of us.
I
And
know it.
it seems like I have a few people that I know that are very close to me that I know that they've struggled with fertility. Um, but it just feels like something we don't talk about
I
as a
know.
culture. What's your take on why we don't talk about the difficulty some of us have getting pregnant?
It's a great question, Amanda. I think a lot of us sort of feel like people don't understand, right? So it's almost like this secrecy kind of perpetuates this idea that we are alone. And so to be that person to share something so vulnerable can be really difficult, especially when kind of the environment doesn't sort of elevate these conversations. So just,
Right.
I think, and we also just societally, I think can struggle holding one another's pain, right? So if this is
Absolutely.
something that I try to share, right, someone might, try to offer something that they think will be helpful, and yet it in fact is actually re-injuring, right? And
Yes. I
yeah.
I was thinking of I have a friend who had two miscarriages in a row. Um and in both cases, she was I think about 12 weeks along, um, which is pretty far along in a pregnancy to lose it at that point. You become attached to that little baby inside of you and you're planning the future. And she was very open about it and on social media, and she's a large following. And people were, well, you did this wrong. You should have done that. Why didn't you eat this? I can't believe you did that. And she was questioning whether she should have shared
Right.
because she knew that she wished that people had shared, but also
Right.
like you said, it was almost like re-traumatizing her every
That's right.
time those comments showed up, every time someone told her that she was not good enough, like she did something wrong.
That's right. She did something wrong, or, she, this story that we can hear that we were too stressed out, or another one of, well, at least you can get pregnant, right? And so again, these incredibly, and perhaps they're well-meaning, perhaps they're well-intentioned, but they can be incredibly re-injuring, incredibly re-traumatizing, right, for someone who's navigating the space.
And
Yeah.
so, with that, when I think about, how my friend navigated that, it makes sense that she wouldn't want to share and that many of us wouldn't want to share, because there must be something wrong with you. And it
Hmm.
often feels like there must be something wrong with you as the woman,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
That, um, and that is often true, right? That there's stuff going on in a woman's body, but men can also have
They do.
fertility problems.
Sure.
Um, and so curious what you like, if we're thinking about like men and women, and because women are often held to this kind of higher standard of, you've got to be the one to get pregnant. When they don't, do you think there's any shame involved in that? Like, I'm not good enough. I'm not a real woman because I
Oh
can't.
my gosh. Amanda, that's really an understatement, right? I mean, there's so much, I think, culturally that is tied to women in particular becoming mothers, right? And what that means to the identity of a woman, right? How much that is elevated, even more so than it is for men. And so it can be incredibly devastating. And again, the secrecy also exacerbates the shame, right? The less people are talking about it, the more that we feel like we are alone in it, the more it kind of heightens this experience of shame for us, right? And the way that I describe it is shame, it tells a story. And often that story is inaccurate, right? It's a real story. It comes from somewhere, but it's not necessarily, it's
Right.
not an accurate story.
And I think that, as women, the story that we're told is to be a woman, a complete woman,
That's
you
right.
need to have a child, you need to be a mother. And I do think that some of that is shifting, that, it's becoming more normalized that some women just don't want children. But I think
Mhm.
there's a difference between I don't want children, and that's a choice that I've made, and I want kids and I'm not able to have them.
Oh gosh. Yeah, that's right. There's a distinction there, right? One is something that I choose, right? One is something that, it feels like it's coming from an empowered place, and the other is one that's coming from a place of disempowerment, right? A place of grief.
And, use that word grief. And I think that's a great word, both when it comes to a pregnancy loss with that, with a miscarriage, but also that grief that comes with, I mean, almost every month, right? When your period starts and there's some grief there. It's like, again, like yet again, I don't have this baby that I want. And you've lost that hope almost of having that child that you've dreamed of. And for I think a
That's
lot of
right.
women, it's a dream that we've had being a mom since you were tiny and you got your first doll. And I know I said some women don't want kids, and that's becoming more okay societally. It's fine. I have no problem. If you want kids, great. If you don't, awesome. But I think as we've made that more okay, like there's
Mhm.
still this, like, I want a kid and that's what's gonna make me whole
Oh,
and
yeah. Oh yeah, it's like this, I think the way that I can language it therapeutically, it's like this anticipatory grief, right? This, every month, as you described, Amanda, of um holding hope. And to hold hope is vulnerable. It is tender to give yourself permission to hope. And when that hope is, met with disappointment month after month after month, it is devastating. It's emotionally, mentally, physically, perhaps even spiritually devastating.
yeah. I honestly hadn't thought of the spiritual side of it, and that, I could imagine there's a God, why are you doing this to me? This is all I want. Am I not good enough? Like in your eyes, referring to God. And that's something I hadn't thought of, and certainly our spiritual relationships impact our mental health as well.
That's right. That's right. There's the spiritual component of, and for people who have some, spiritual connection, right? This idea that children are a blessing and therefore am I not receiving a blessing? So many narratives, I think, that can be harmful for us and re injuring for us as we're navigating this space. And I think what's also particularly painful about navigating fertility issues is that often these are pains that can go unseen, right, to people around us, right? And yet we can experience triggers anywhere, right? I remember for me when I was trying to, get pregnant, or I had just had a miscarriage, or I was recovering from,
Mhm.
emergency ectopic surgery. I'd be walking down the street. I lived in San Francisco at the time. It was a walking city. I was walking down the street to pick up, I don't know, something from the store, and I passed by someone who was clearly pregnant, and it was just gutting, It was just getting, right? And so these reminders that can happen anywhere, right? Whether it be a parent and child interaction that you witness, right? Something on social media,
A diaper
someone's pregnant,
commercial,
a diaper commercial.
right? I mean, and it's
It's
all around us.
right. It's all around us. And so again, it's, this kind of silent grief that we can be navigating. So it's the grief itself coupled with what we describe as the grief story. What's the story that I'm telling myself about myself in the midst of this grief? Am I not good enough? Am I a failure? Right? Am I, not being blessed? Right?
Right.
Is something wrong with me? So the pain in and of itself coupled with the story that I can tell myself about myself in the midst of this. It's devastating.
And, the stories that other people are telling us on top of the stories that we're telling ourselves.
Hello.
Which just, it's like another voice of some level of you're not good enough. You're not worthy of whatever this is. And, I'll share a story with you of, when I was trying to get pregnant with my daughter, and we were struggling. And I got on Clomid and I got off because it was not great for my mental health. Just the hormones ended up being enough to get me my, body saying, okay, well, we'll get pregnant. But before that, I want to state that this is not a political statement before I get any further into this, but I was working for a large retail company. And I had a cashier who was 16 or 17. She was walking through the break room and she was on her phone. And it was clear she was talking to a friend who was pregnant. And she said something along the lines of, oh, it's okay. You can just get rid of it. And here I am, married and financially secure and desperate for a child. And all I want is to be pregnant. And I heard that. My heart broke because I was like, it's not fair. Like this child just like got pregnant, doesn't want it. And I'm a grown adult that's married and has a, space in my home and the resources and the love in my heart. And I don't get to be a mom. That's all I wanted is to be a mom.
Yes. I feel that with you.
And I know that, I felt really lucky that those just few months of hormone treatments was enough for me. I know that that's not enough for a whole lot of people out there. And one of the things that gets in the way, I think, is the cost of treatment. So when you're working with people, how does that show up? Just the cost?
Yeah, I mean, I think the cost of treatment is very real and very important to identify as just a compounded stressor in the midst of having to navigate fertility issues, right? So much of fertility treatments are not covered, right? So coupled with, I think, judgment that people can have around fertility treatments, it's also generally not covered by insurance. And there is a significant cost. And the challenge, I think, with the cost is that there is not a guaranteed return, right? So these are really just chances that you are taking, right? Yes. And financial chances that you are taking. And it is incredibly scary.
I did a little research and it looks like IVF, like in vitro fertilization, can cost anywhere from 15 to 25,000. I think it depends on per cycle.
That's exactly right.
Mm-hmm. And so I found through the CDC's website a calculator where you can put in like your age and your some other factors that show you the likelihood that you would get pregnant on the first, second, or third IVF procedure. So for me, as a 43-year-old woman who's a little overweight, but has also had a pregnancy, which means it's easier for me to get pregnant again. Sure. And with one round, there's an 8% likelihood that I would get pregnant. 2 rounds, that moves it up to 16% total between those two. And with 3, we're only at 20%. So that means that I could spend $75,000, which is an annual salary for a lot of people, for heck,
Hello.
majority
Hello.
of people. And that only gives me a 20% chance of success.
That's exactly right. That's
And
exactly right. And you're having to make these kinds of decisions, right? Coupled with, bargaining or trying to negotiate with the insurance companies and, having to, deal with the healthcare, system,
mhm.
on top of this incredibly deep, vulnerable longing to expand your family.
And I I could imagine as well that there might be some disconnect in couples
That's right.
about how much treatment, how much they're willing to pay, um, and an additional just stress on a relationship when wanting, like, when just going through this whole process, I,
That's right.
so first, have you ever noticed that there's kind of a blame game that happens? Like, this is your fault that we're going through this,
It's a,
that impacts
yeah,
relationships.
it's a great question. I don't experience the blame game as much as this. I think particularly there's generally when I'm sitting with couples, there's generally one person that's really desperate to fix it, right? And when the couple, right, when each person in the couple is in fact going through this kind of joint grief, it can be very difficult for them to hold one another's because they are also in pain, right, where they do not necessarily have the capacity to hold their partner's grief in the midst of it, right?
Right.
So that can often create tension, frustration, disconnection, where I don't want to come to my partner and share with them that I am devastated because I know that my partner's also going through their own pain, right? And so you end up sort of moving in your silos or kind of in your corners, but the grief will manifest, right? The grief might manifest in your irritability or anger or withdrawing, right, from just
Right.
day to day, right? And so what I try to do in the therapeutic space is really help couples try to hold their own experiences in a way that can feel safe for them, right, in a way in which they don't feel like they are burdening the other, and and that they actually learn the tools to hold space for their partners as well, right? I think
Yeah.
so often their part, when I let's so for example, in my situation when I was going through this, and so was my husband, my partner, um, one of the things that was really important for me was that he could essentially just stay there with me rather than try to fix it, rather than try to go to all the different sort of possible solutions.
And
Um, yeah,
I know in my experience, this is in my world, and I don't know how true it is for others, but I've found that men want to fix the problem.
yeah,
And like, there's a problem, I'm gonna fix it. And with fertility, that's not an easy fix, and it's certainly not something that can be often fixed without medical intervention.
that's right. That's
Um,
right.
and so when, we talked about the cost of this, um, what's been your experience in dealing with couples around the financial strain that can come with fertility treatments?
It's very difficult, right? Again, it's a very difficult situation. I think particularly for me as a therapist, I do not, I am not the person to offer sort of solutions for them as far as their own relationship. What I try to develop in the therapeutic space is a space in which they can actually talk about this in a way that keeps them connected, right? Talking about both of their vulnerabilities rather than talking to one another from our defensive postures,
Right.
right? How do we actually talk to one another from a more tender, more vulnerable place in which we can hold space for each other,
Yeah,
right?
it's kind of a
Mhm.
like having this child is important to me because instead of
Exactly.
how dare you not give me a child, or why are you emotional all the time?
That's right. And I think often what I try to help clients um, talk through is the next right thing. So uh, fertility issues can activate for us anxiety for good reason, because we can feel incredibly disempowered, right? I always say there's like this inverse direct relationship between anxiety and empowerment, meaning the more anxious I am, generally, the less empowered I feel. The less anxious I am, the more empowered I feel. So, what we try to tap into is where the couple can stay empowered. What does that look like for them? What are the questions that they need to ask their doctor in order to feel empowered in any way that they can? Because there can be such helplessness in the midst of navigating fertility issues. And I always say information gathering is really, really powerful and helpful
Mhm.
for us, particularly in combating anxiety. Right? Yeah. Go
When
ahead.
you know, right, like when you can expect something, or you have an idea that something is coming, there's not that like anxiety, that almost jump scare or what. I know that's right, but I'm
That's
also
right.
thinking of I love this idea of providing a therapeutic space for them to get on the same page, figure out what they want to talk to the doctor about, um, and almost prep for it so that they are having all their needs met at the doctor's office. Because I think so many of us get frazzled. The doctors are in a hurry because they have a bunch of patients that they need to see. So we forget things, and then, oh my gosh,
That's
I
right.
forgot that. And why did you forget to ask that question? Or
That's right. That's right. So yeah. And so I think one of the helpful therapeutic techniques is how do we help the couple kind of navigate just that next step, right? Because that next step and the outcome of the next step can often inform the following steps, right? And so it
right,
really helps us in that place where we can catastrophize, we can go to all the different what ifs,
right.
and it's just not helpful, right? It's just not effective for us. As much as it can come up for us for our good reason, it's not helpful or effective. And so that's where we really try to practice what's that next right step. And also, I think particularly for couples and relationships, what are some of the boundaries that are really going to be helpful for the two of you in moving through these spaces, right? Maybe it's something like, uh, you know, having to be really intentional about who we talk to, right? Maybe I'm not going to share this with everybody, particularly the people that when I actually have this conversation with them, I feel worse. Maybe I have to be really intentional about, how much I share this with family, right? How much we share this process with our family. And so those are some of the things
Right.
that we talk about in the therapeutic space to help, I think, couples um, really become just more empowered in how they navigate this journey.
And I'm like, I've always thought, especially as I've gotten older, that you don't ask a woman when she's having kids or if she's pregnant until that baby is coming out of her, right?
Hello. Hello. Yeah,
Like it's not your business.
that's right.
But how I know that when I was asked, "Look, when are y'all having kids? What's your plan? You'll have been married for, however many years now." So what's your recommendation for people who are experiencing infertility when they get those "when are you having kids" questions?
I think I love this. I think I heard it from Tarana Burke. She's an author, and she says, no one is entitled to your story. No one is entitled to your story. Right. And so when I work with couples or clients who are navigating fertility issues, I really try to help them. Um, we talk through these things, right? We talk
Right.
through, where, environments in which they can be met with questions like that. What is a response that feels appropriate to them, right? What are some of the boundaries that are important for them as far as how they engage that conversation, right? Giving themselves permission
Mhm.
to be very firm with their response and, kind and firm with their response. Right.
And, I remember my sister, I said, well, when are you guys having kids? And she said, oh, we're not. We don't want them. And I said, why not? There was no judgment for me. I was just curious. And she said,
Sure.
quite frankly, I'm too selfish. I don't want the burden of a child. I want to be able to
Yeah.
travel. I want to do all of these things. I like my money. You know what? And for me, that was the last time we talked about it because
Mhm.
she told me and then it was done. Now, when I was trying to get pregnant, she and I spoke a lot about it because I trusted her and she could hold that safe space for me.
Sure.
But I remember there were other people who I had shared that we were trying to get pregnant, and every month, are you pregnant yet? Have you when was the last time you took a pregnancy test? Did you have your period? And I just remember feeling almost violated
That's right.
by those
Yeah.
questions because those are questions that my doctor and I are talking about. Those are questions that my partner and I are talking about. I don't want to discuss that while I'm, at Target because I ran into you and you know that I've been trying. And I wonder if that's part of why we don't talk about the trying and the, infertility. Because like you said, it re-traumatizes, like, right, it re-injures us when every time we're reminded that, and I'm that we're a failure. And I don't think that that means you're a failure at all. I just think that that's how we internalize it is
That's exactly
if
right. Yep.
I can't get pregnant and I want to, I am a failure. There's something wrong with me.
That's exactly
Um,
right. And yep. And that's, I think, what can happen is we share this with, people in our lives. And again, coming from a good intention place, right? A well-intentioned place, they
Right.
will ask or check in. But it feels incredibly violating. It's incredibly personal. And again, that's where the boundaries are really important. How do we craft language that's important for us as far as communicating? I'm not speaking about that, right? Or here's how you can support me. Here's how you can support me, right?
And
And this is what that looks like. And it's different for all of us, right? Support looks different for all of us.
and I think boundaries are really
Huge.
important. I mean, period, in every aspect of our lives. But, when it comes to big life things like this, it's okay to say, you know what, even like, you know what, mom,
Mhm.
I am not talking to you about this, or I will let you know when I need help.
That's
Or
exactly it.
please don't ask me about this, but if I need to talk about it, I promise you I will come to you.
That's right. That's right. And yep.
And those
What
are
I would, yeah.
go ahead.
What I would just add to that is, I think to your point and, what we're talking about, the boundaries are incredibly important. And I would encourage, anybody I'm working with who's navigating fertility issues, I would encourage you to really think about and consider, is there one person, right? And maybe it's my therapist, right? One
Mhm.
person in my life whom I really feel like I can um, give myself permission to go there with. Because often the inclination for us when we are, in the throes of something just so overwhelming, it can be to isolate, and for good reason.
Mhm.
Sometimes we need to take that time, and sometimes, right, um, taking that time for longer than a particular period can, in fact, be harmful,
Right.
right? That it is really important for us to engage in relationships that are safe, right? That are safe. And so, again, maybe it's that one person, maybe it's my partner, maybe it's a friend who gets it, right? Giving myself permission to connect with just one person who has, a sense of what I'm going through. I also encourage for clients to give themselves permission to maybe write, right? Or journal throughout the process
Mhm.
to find ways in which the things that they're navigating emotionally, kind of like that are floating around, can just be grounded through, any
Mhm.
exercise. I often find writing to be helpful, talking about it with someone to be helpful, um, but just kind of building some more grounding
Right.
practices. Yeah.
I'm going to share this with you because it's something that I love that, and I tell my clients too, is sometimes, exercise, we're told to exercise or move our body. And
Sure.
then also to journal is great. It's a great emotional release. It's a great way to
Yes.
process things. A lot of the women that I work with say they just don't have time to do all of those things. So I encourage people out there in Google Docs, or there's other things out there, throw your headphones in, go for a walk, and just talk.
Yes.
Get it all out. And it may not make any sense. You don't even need to read it back. But like you said, there is something powerful about getting all of that out.
That's
And
right.
it's powerful about having that support system, even one person. And maybe one person is, one person is all you really need. And sometimes I think having just that one means you don't have to re-explain everything, right? You don't have to go through all of that again. You've got this one person that knows the story.
That's exactly it. I love that, right? It's that the grounding practice of just taking what's kind of floating out, in our minds and just allowing it to, whether it be put in paper, just be released through spoken word. Yeah. Yeah.
And so I think, there's this, like, as we're wrapping this up, I think, what I'm getting is support is crucial. Giving yourself permission to feel the things.
Yes.
And understanding
Boundaries.
that you're not alone, and boundaries. Oh yeah. Boundaries. You're not alone. Having a
And
solid support system.
yes. And I would say just that next right thing. Practice of that next right thing. What's that next right move for me? As a way of tapping into any kind of empowerment. What's that next right step? Yeah.
And that I'm gonna throw this out, that next right step might be right in that moment, but later it might not be, the next time you need to go to a step, it might not be that. It might be something completely different, which is
Yes.
why it's important to really think about what is the future? What do I want? And having a mental health professional like yourself that you can go to, that's a neutral third party that is invested in you, not in the situation. They
That's
want
exactly right.
you to be
Yeah.
healthy and happy, not, asking well, when is it going to happen? And well, have you tried all of these different things that are quite frankly not always useful, especially if they're not your doctor. They don't know what's happening inside your body.
That's exactly right. And I always say that my client is the expert in their lived experience, and our practice is really helping them tap into their intuitive wisdom. And this kind of continued connection with our intuitive wisdom is important to your point, right? What was the right next thing, you know, 2 days ago, maybe different today. And so just continuing to stay connected to that, and I think the last thing I'll say, Amanda, is that more than anything, I think what is most important is the story that we are telling ourselves about ourselves. The story that we are telling ourselves about ourselves. And that's really important, I would say, to protect and keep sacred, because people have their opinions. There is a lot coming at us, right, with regard to
Right.
culture. And again, people that are coming from well-intentioned places and maybe not so well-intentioned, right? And what does it
Mhm.
look like for us to really tap into the truth of who we are, right? What it means to protect who we are as humans, right? And care for ourselves and build up our
Mhm.
sense of self in the midst of this.
And I'd like to add one thing to the, know your story piece is, if that story isn't serving you, like if it's not, that story doesn't feel good to you,
Yeah.
where did that story come from?
Yeah.
And how can you shift that story so that it's serving you and it's helping you grow and not feel icky? And that's a very technical term, I know, but all the time. So
Yeah.
thank you for, sharing some of your story, and giving our listeners a chance to hear kind of what all is behind the scenes when it comes to infertility and how it really does impact our personal well-being and our relationships. And I would argue, therefore, the world as a whole, because when we're not whole, the whole world isn't as perfect as it was made to be. So thank you for providing that space for those couples and for sharing your knowledge, your experience, and your story. If you would like to find out more about Julie and what she does, you can check out her website, which is juliehalltherapy.com. And I will link that in the show notes as well. And we have reached the end of today's episode. So I'd like to thank all of you for listening and learning more about how mental health and society meet. Now go out and open a conversation. Discover how mental health is experienced in your world. You can find more episodes of the Mental Society in all the places where you find your favorite podcast. And don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss out on anything. You can find additional resources and articles by visiting our website, thementalsociety.com. And remember that you are not alone in your struggles. Help and hope are all around you. Until next time, this is Amanda Dolan wishing you good health, mental and otherwise.